vorige Begriff ist gemacht.
Du kennst die Gemeinde, muss okay. Jetzt mich introduced.
Hello and welcome back to Secrets Behind the Mic. Haan haben wir uns Chayim Shlomya. Chaim, zeg hallo.
Hallo, shalom aleichem.
Excellent. Jetzt ist sich introduced. Jetzt kann man geben mal Lesch aus the music and a heimgehen.
That's all I was here for the introduction.
That's it. Once wir schon do, darf man schon nicht...
There we go. Yeah.
Jetzt erst dich?
Yeah.
Excellent.
Claude.
So basically, die hast mir gecallt und das mir gesagt hat, die willst da rüberkommen und reden wegen the current events, was heißt Afghanistan, was geht jetzt vor in Afghanistan. Und ich will sehr stark hören, actually down perspective. So, das machen ist mehr interessant, weil actually will ich was hören.
Well, actually, ich bin nicht so weit interessiert zu reden current events. Ich will nur geben, weil Afghanistan ist in der Nähe ist. Aber ich will geben mein Perspektive nicht on the events that's happening right now, nor share my experience from Zan deployed in Afghanistan in 2016. So, and of course, met Cohen was guide voor jetzt in wusste ich habe als mitgehalten damals, was ich sehe jetzt, wie ich stelle es die eine zu der andere, but predominantly reden von was ich habe experienced damals. And the fact as es jetzt heißen Anais is funny because anybody hat mich gefragt, der letzte Interview, bist du in der Militär, bist du in der Army? Oh, okay. Wie bist du alles gefahren? Ich bin in Afghanistan 2016. Ja, so noch dumme Gomme daten? Noch dumme Gomme. I guess CNN and Fox News hat gesagt, dass du dumme Gomme, but yeah, absolutely. So,
Der letzte 20 Jahre.
Jetzt versteht jeder einen, sind schon 20 Jahre, September 11, wow. But just to rewind the clock a little bit, ich bin nicht gewähnt an adult during September 11, but ich bin in New York. Ich glaube, die bist auch gewähnt in New York, but ich bin in Upstate. Farkas von Upstate in
No, Farkas schon aus.
in ich bin in einem Butterpack damals, ich bin 12 Jahre alt. Und ich habe mitgehalten September 11. In when I joined the military in 2015, it wasn't a motivation, it's nicht gewesen, also was patriotic. Ich habe es getan for any number of reasons, was ich joined. But when ich mich gefunden habe in Afghanistan, habe ich hatte first-hand experience, first-hand knowledge, first-hand view on was ich gegangen in Afghanistan, was ich gewesen the motivation, was ich gewesen the mission in define success, define winning, and define an exit strategy. Yeah? So September 11 happens, right? And I weiß mehr bevor gewiss damals, but 15 out of the 19 hijackers were Saudi Arabian, right?
Yeah.
Allies of the United States. And Osama bin Laden, of course, is Saudi Arabian himself. And the ganze Stahlschiff is in Afghanistan, all that, but September 11th happens, and it's Gaiman al-Muhammad. Why was Gaiman al-Muhammad? Because jeder hat verstanden als we geharged 3,000 Americans and destroyed the economy. It was destruction. It was chaos. It was fair. It was real.
Jeder gewalt beleid damals.
Yeah. And since you about blitz, we justified, right? Since nur als eine
Komma mit 2 buildings.
Yeah.
3,000 Menschen. Yeah.
It was real. It wasn't hyperbolic. It wasn't blown out of proportion. It was a real response. But Hans weiß man a bisschen mehr, was als vorgegangen damals. And not that we're second guessing why we did certain things, just to be more open and honest of the things that the people in the know and the people in power actually knew what was going on then. So Hans Weissman, as when then President Bush had proposed, as other the Taliban gave him off Osama bin Laden to the Americans, other guy in Muhammad, in sie gegangen am Choma. Hat verstanden, Kili, sie haben die Achnuse Sorgen, wie sie geben, so schrecklich wer sie ist, es kommt zu sein als Gast, geben sie eine Schauf, which is true. But Hans Weizmann has then given great to negotiate with the Americans, because wie viel sie können fighten als a militant group, America is going to destroy them. It's going to completely fuck them up. And Lamas sind gegangen am Choma. But I nicht gewollt negotiating because of the theory we don't negotiate with terrorists or whatever other excuse, because we were more out for blood more than just Osama bin Laden. So it's a megagan Muhammad. And fast forward 10 years, 2011, and we'll get to Osama bin Laden, it is tight. So let's say if that was the motivation to Muhammad, then 2011 would have been a good time to say, okay, let's pack man sich zusammen and get daheim.
Mission complete.
Not to mention, Al-Qaeda itself, in the Muhammad gegen the Taliban, in the Muhammad gegen Al-Qaeda, the terrorist group, was attacked. But the Taliban happened to be in charge in Afghanistan, and Zayim Gold aufgeben Al-Qaeda. So then most people conflate the two, but Taliban is in a political militant group, will rule Sharia law in Afghanistan, and Kashim beef with anybody outside of Afghanistan itself, but they were harboring terrorists. Al-Qaeda, they had their camps, and Osama bin Laden had beef with the United States, and he was able to execute his plot against the United States from Afghanistan. So, Zagana Muhammad, unwissen als am gewollt aufgeben Osama bin Laden, but some Zagana Muhammad is justified. But I'm the mission again to destroy Al-Qaeda and capture or kill Osama bin Laden, but succeeded with beide, because Al-Qaeda at the time, in 2011, again, Gunish, a few fighters and nothing left. Osama bin Laden wasn't even there anymore. Well, we trapped him in Abbottabad, in Pakistan, right?
At the border.
That's right. So at that point, in practically, was the Kenzain, as Obama damals gesagt, we're going to draw down the, when he came into power, when we became president, hat gesagt, as Iraq is considered the stupid war, right? Because Han Weiss von us drinking WMDs, and there was no reason to go to Iraq at the time, and they definitely didn't work with they weren't behind 9/11. Han Weiss mission, but at the time in 2009, 2010, I'm showing you this is the stupid war, and Afghanistan is the justified is the good war. So he was drawing down troops in Iraq, and he shut that down in 2011, and to focusing on Afghanistan, and then in 2010, they got the surge in Afghanistan up to 100,000 troops. And with the mission of completing whatever we wanted to complete, and in 2014, we ended combat operations in Afghanistan. So the mission changed from Operation Enduring Freedom, fin noch 9/11 biz 2014. In January 1st, 2015, so the mission is to Operation Freedom Sentinel, that we're going to be training and advising the Afghan army, and we're going to try to support them, and we're going to do
air support,
close air support, and we're still gonna attack. We're still gonna fight back if they mess with us. But there was an unspoken understanding that as long as the Taliban doesn't directly affect the United States, we're not gonna fight them, because this is not our fight anymore. We're going to try to get the Afghans to the front line, and we'll be behind them to support them in the fight and to train them.
Yeah, the backhand stuff. Yeah.
So, Helmand Province, during the surge of Afghanistan in 2010, Helmand Province was a very strategic, in southern Afghanistan was very strategic, and the Afghans and the Americans were losing the war. And actually, it wasn't so much the Americans, the British. The British came after 9/11 when they joined the war, and they actually built, in the middle of the desert, a city in the middle of the desert, and it was a combination of 3 bases. Camp Leatherneck, which was the Brits, up to 30,000 troops at the height of the surge and height of the war. Right next to Camp Bastion, which was the United States had their troops, but nicht as große von dem wie the British, because British were the ones in charge of Helmand Province. And then you had Shorab, Shubarak, obviously the Afghans. But es eine große Gruppe angeteilt in 3. And the Camp Bastion given the airstrip given, and the Marines given in southern Afghanistan. So in 2010 rather, during the surge, the Marines went in, and there's a lot, the Battle of Marja, Lashkar Gah, the other state in southern Afghanistan, in Helmand Province, on YouTube, to do documentaries, there was a big fight to push the Taliban out. And by the end of 2014, so they had those, that was during the surge in 2010, but when the Brits took care of business, and by the end of 2014, when we ended combat operations, the Marines pulled out of Helmand Province and handed over, so did the Brits, handed over Camp Leatherneck, Bastion, to the Afghan army. Fast forward to the end of 2015, and the Taliban came in Sirik and Taliban bitter makas, and they are killing company-sized elements, which is up to 200 soldiers, company size, of Afghan troops. Metal bitter for the Afghans, and they can't go and we're not there to support them.
How can they not do anything?
Because they're ill-equipped. And we'll get to that point, how ill-equipped they are to fight their own wars
Yeah,
Zayt hand.
but versus the Taliban, they didn't have sophisticated.
But it wasn't so much about sophistication as insurgency, like an IED, and just to shoot to destroy and to kill. And these types are strategic and richtig. But I'll get to that point how weak they are when we fast forward to today. So Obama was like, "Oops." We pulled out of many bases in 2014 when we finished combat operations and gave it to the Afghans, and we're only in the big bases, not on the FOBs, the forward operating bases and all. Because Helmand is strategic, and in parentheses, strategic because there's a lot of poppy in southern Afghanistan and Helmand, but we'll get to that in a second. But even without that, the Afghans are literally getting slaughtered, right? And we cannot let Helmand fall. The Pentagon had gesicht a unit of 500-700 troops to go back into southern Afghanistan, into Shorab, into Bastion, Leatherneck, to train and support the Afghan troops. And my unit, I had just finished training. I got to my first unit, and we were, of all hundreds of thousands of troops, I was lucky, I guess, that I landed in the battalion 287, 2nd Battalion, 87th Infantry Regiment, to deploy just as a small unit of 500-600 soldiers, nicht a große brigade or whatnot, because usually, without getting into it, when you deploy, you usually deploy as a brigade if you're part of the infantry or armor. Just a small battalion-sized element to go there and at least hold the line. So this was the mission statement: was we're here in Helmand, we're holding the line in Helmand because Helmand cannot fall. That was the mission statement, because we cannot allow the Taliban to overrun Helmand. And okay, so we're training up for the mission. The training exercises and everything we were geared for was very conventional, textbook. We go out to the field, we pretend we're at war, and we're fighting against an enemy, and we're ambushing, and we're doing close combat operations, and room clearing, and route clearing, and patrols, and all that. Just standard stuff that an infantry unit would train on. And in the deployment camp in Afghanistan, we get on a plane in Fort Drum, New York. We fly all the way on commercial chartered flight to Kuwait. We're in Kuwait for a few days just to in-process into theater, as they call it, the gateway to theater. And then we take a military jet, a C-17, with the entire unit was split up in a few chalks, as they call it, but 200 at a time, straight from Kuwait into southern Afghanistan, into the airstrip that I just mentioned earlier. That was all manned mostly by the Afghans. But a month before we got there, a small company size of 100 soldiers went back there without anything. No showers, no toilet, no latrines, no nothing. No running clean water to set up the base to receive because we haven't been there in a few years, in more than a year. And sister unit, as they call it, 214, hingefahren mit 100 soldiers, 100 plus soldiers to set it up for us. Wenn sie mir umgekommen, schon gewähnt, ein bisschen heißes Wasser, man noch gegessen MREs, noch gedrinkt Regeln zu essen, but it's kommen nur nachhin. And and them stuck in a tiny little annex, as they call it, as a basaruf from the große base, a tiny little, probably 300 feet by 300 feet, a tiny little thing with buildings, of course, with harsh structures for bunkers and tactical operation centers, wie man schluft, and we do all that. But we're here to train and advise and assist the Afghan army, and we train conventionally as if we're going to war with the Russians. In Zamaroni came in Afghanistan, and we had no fucking clue what we were doing. Okay? Me personally, what was my mission? So I joined as a combat medic, and when I completed my training, my basic training, and then my follow-on training to be a combat medic, when I completed training, I went to an infantry unit as a medic to be embedded, mit the fighters, mit the infantrymen. Since I got a kleine platoon von 40 medics, and achalik sind gegangen mit the infantrymen, geschlafen mit getraint mit sein, achalik sind geblieben in the 8th station, mit the PA and the doc and all that. So I was chosen as a brand new private. I was a little old, I was 26, I was mature, so they chose me right when I came out of training to go and be a platoon medic. So go with a platoon-sized element of infantrymen and be their assigned medic. So me, as a brand new private, was in charge and was given the responsibility of the health and well-being as the only medic for a platoon size of around 25, 26 soldiers. Okay? And I've had my training before we deployed. I went to a live tissue lab. So AFGH spielt sich with live tissue with real blood and real injuries of animals, not humans, obviously, but good train up. But it's kimmer on hin and was timid. Why are we here? Okay, in the here, so that aufkommen mit an idea. Helmet cannot fall, so we're here to hold the line. How are we going to hold the line? We're going to train, advise, and assist the Afghan National
soldiers.
Army. But it's how many. It's a doctrine. Okay, so you can geherige, because special forces actually are what we call a force multiplier. So a special forces team from 12 soldiers, special forces ops, spec ops, will go into a country at war or whatnot and train the guerrillas and train militias. Just 12 special forces soldiers can train a whole thousands and thousands of soldiers, force multipliers. But that's special operations. In a conventional regular unit, and in them do to team was antetalen was team we're not the ones that come up with the rules. We don't know how to train others. We're not trained for that. Okay, it's coming on a hand, and the small unit of 100 soldiers is so then they're getting ready to go to the Grosse base and I'm in a shower. They were literally had nothing. After a month they were done. So we were there for a day, what we call left seat, right seat. So he's in the driver's seat and we're in the passenger seat. It's a metaphor. As in zemer wie het is. Nog een tip me flipped and ich is and avat schmiegels ich is. So that it's just a term in the military, left seat, right seat. We hebben tibber. RIP. RIP is relieve in place. So when a unit komt eraan en ander gaat eruit, spent men dat 2-3 take zusammen zu verstehen was gaat voor. And basically, so again, there was a few missions. Eins, flight line security. That was my first mission. Flight line security and some on our airfield and some on our flight line. But instead of securing the flight line, jedes moest komt vliegen eraan en eruit with cargo, with personnel, with ammunition, whatever we need, with supplies. But if we don't secure the flight line, we're going to get into they're going to try to shoot at the plane, and we have to keep it secure. Now we're not going to
on the ground.
Yeah, on the ground.
So you go out.
Yeah, we go out of our base to the airstrip, which is right outside our base. We have to secure it, even though it's predominantly secure. But we're not looking for any additional trouble, especially when the planes are coming in. So
yeah, I know
additional, So that was FSL, flightline, FLS, flightline security. That was my platoon's first mission. The other platoons that were there had base security, so the base that we were in, that home security with tower guards and all that, and ECPs, entry and exit control points, the gate alliance, wer gate, man halt gejm pikkel wie viel soldiers and roos, was coming around, the locals that bringen Wasser mit Essen, whatever was coming around, the barbers, whatever, the ECP. So there's many different missions that get around nor as in the Medat, plus the mission of train, advise and assist. Jede Chodesh, jede paar Wochen tauschen wir rotations. So ungefähr mit flightline security, noch sind wir gegangen to train, advise and assist, and noch sind wir gegangen to the base security, so on and so forth. But the reason we're there is to train, advise, and assist. And we don't have a fucking clue what's in that. Okay? So we're winging it. It's guy those teams, rotations, I took it there, I took it, but it's constant rotations, we're running mission. And you kind of figure it out because in vice versa Timmer, so at some point we kind of build a rapport and a relationship with the local commanders, the Afghan commanders, and we meet, and there's what they call a BUB, a battle update brief. You meet once a week, and we verstaat zich aan de andere and interpreters, so we're trying to improve the matzav. But every night rather, when we were briefed about the next day's mission or anything significant that happened, we kept getting briefs from intel, from the intelligence people.
Side of things.
That waren sie in the desert. Their base is in the desert. The state, Marja, Lashkaga, man hat sich einschlagen. The Afghans, nicht uns. Das gehen wir nicht rausgehen. And the other reasons why we didn't go out to support, with them in combat is because we were gone for a year. We had no intelligence or knowledge about any IEDs. So we considered anything outside the wire to be a minefield of IEDs. And it probably was. So if we were to go out with and test the waters, as they say, we would take casualties, we would take injuries, we would take heat. So we would try to stay as much as we could confined to our base and to their bases and try to support them as best we can. But nicht herausgehen in combat. But when some hit, they came at intel, the Afghans are still getting slaughtered, right? So basically, the trainees, so that arbeit is a kili basic training for zij, but they gaan gelachen milchoma. Sindsgeli ga je basic training, nog echt 2 unit, en dan ga je iets te sloffen, nog iets te essen, en nog een gaat met een milchoma. Dat, you're at war. So, je kent wissen, haan trainer deze soldier, morgen is het tijd. One of the many...
What was the reason? What was the reasons given as all over the place?
Yeah, so why are the Afghans so ill-equipped?
Ill-equipped means that ze mit gear?
Nicht nur gear, ill-equipped in general. Skill,
okay.
The will to fight, gear, support, because at this point, biz 2014, we were the ones on the front line, and they were there if we had them supporting us, essentially. In some echt nicht gedacht, but in some getreut, team zusammen, jointly, after 2014.
Driver's seat and passenger seat.
Yeah, but after 2014, they were in the driver's seat. And that was the point. Like, at some point, when guy met a from Afghanistan, when guy met a So, Medaf Toshin the mission as if, okay, we built them up. At this point, you got to prove yourself. So why are they so incompetent? Why are they so ill-equipped? Afghanistan as a whole is, we thought hubris. Hubris is chutzpah. In something got the chutzpah, in something got the balls, like, nah, we're going to defy the odds. Most recently, the Soviets, right? 10 years, they call it a graveyard of empires. They call Afghanistan the graveyard of empires. Because going back thousands of years, Afghanistan is a very strategic geographically in the world. The natural resources that have in Afghanistan, it's rich with minerals and natural resources.
Poppy seeds.
Minerals was liggen hand bij in de funds. Alles was mijn mind in Afghanistan, in Afghanistan, in Africa. Ik doe a sach van de minerals was men extract my mind in Afghanistan as well. It's always a reason to. There is always an outside influence, Soviets or whatnot, that want Afghanistan, and they have fought that for thousands of years. How? Because you can't think of Afghanistan as a country, conventional country. I'm an American. Ich wohne in America. I have a certain American pride. I identify as an American because of any number of reasons, right? I feel like ben a Yid and ich hab die Jiddischkeit part, but ich bin noch als
American Yid.
Yeah. In Afghanistan, it was always tribal. So half of Afghanistan is mountainous and half of it is desert. In ein tribe, but the zweite tribe. And it's centrally located in Asia, as of to the west, they border Iran. That are not Arabs, they're Persian, but they're Muslim, right? And to the east, they border Pakistan, and they border the small part that they border the northeast, China. There are Afghans that come from that region that look Chinese. They don't look brown. They don't look Persian. They don't look. Northern Afghanistan is in Tajikistan and Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan and all that, right? They don't look Eastern European either. They're like Asian. It's a mixture of cultures and ethnic backgrounds and tribes. So it's very hard to have a centralized government, a federal government, a state government. So the state government governed the local tribe, let's say, right? Nog maar a centralized government is governed jeder because jede culture is anders. It interpreted the Quran anders. It worshipped Allah anders. It had zijn eigen custom. Het is gewoon anders. Redt anders. Es tut zehnliche Sprachen in Afghanistan allein. Wenn es du Pashto, Dari, mit a bunch kleine andere Sprachen, was jede tribe redt. So I feel this is gewein governments in Kabul in the Hauptstadt. It was never a real government. It was like a government of the ganze Stadt, because once you left the big city, you were under the rule of the local tribe. In a Sach tribe sind sich geschlagen, eine der andere alle Juden. Andere haben sich nicht geschlagen, but sind gewesen separate. And andere sind gewesen zusammen. But especially when the kimst outside, a foreigner, kimt daran du, mich antaran wussetin und trying to nehmen. Even if the intentions were good, in trying to bring democracy, in trying to forget democracy, in trying to bring improvement, to overthrow the Taliban that have Sharia law and they're stoning people in the center, the city square. That's their own business. No problem. They have been doing that thousands of years. But if somebody wants to mess with the other, but they and they're different and they have their own culture. Whether it's the Soviets, whether going all the way back to Alexander Martin, to Alexander the Great, everyone tried and failed. The terrain is hard. It's desert or it's mountainous, right? And in the mountains, in the desert. Is can they survive in Besservians? And that's their backyard.
They've been surviving there thousands of years.
But especially if you're trying to have an outside influence. There were places in Afghanistan when the Americans got there, the locals thought that they were the Russians because they were never on TV. They were never connected. There was some remote village in the middle of bumfuck nowhere, And they knew at some point the Soviets were here, and then 20 years later, some other soldiers showed up. They wouldn't have known any better. Some of the Soviets at the beginning of the
90% didn't even know of 9/11.
Yeah, exactly right.
Didn't even know about 9/11.
I feel the the Taliban are schuldig. The Taliban have ruled the country from Kabul, right? Yes, but they're in charge, but they weren't really in charge. That's why you don't consider Afghanistan a conventional country.
The border between Pakistan and Afghanistan
Tora Bora
is not even a border considered by both people. Like the people,
there's no defined border. This is bad gigs.
they know each other.
Terrain. Yeah.
They go over back and forth. There's no real border there.
Absolutely. So back to the question.
Why
are they so incompetent? Is because when Inzim umgekommen in some getauschte Mission from fighting, it's halt an eintauschen. Mit treffen Bin Laden, but failed to treffen Bin Laden at the beginning. Mit that fighting the Taliban, and then we're going to do counter terrorism, and then we're going to do counter insurgency. Counterinsurgency is different, meaning you're trying to win the hearts and minds. So instead of fucking them up, we're trying to build their schools, build their water plants, build their infrastructure to win hearts and minds. You counter the insurgency by being better than the insurgents that are destroying shit, right? All these different ways of trying to win the war, essentially, and the mission keeps changing. You're never going to win when jeder an Tidvusser will. And you cannot establish a government that is better to their people in Kabul and then rule the country and everyone should be on board. Maybe not everyone, but at least Democrats and Republicans, they should have some sort of resemblance of stability of an overall government, and then local governors and local states and local provinces. It's arbeit nicht in Afghanistan. I'm sure there's some other countries like that as well, but when you think of a country, you think conventionally. Iraq, Lamushal, is, yes, there's Sunnis and Shia, but there is national pride. In Afghanistan, there's no national pride. Jeder ist für sich. Man sagt, so getan, ich wohne in der Village, ich sicher nicht wegzugehen, ich sicher zu bleiben du, in Pascha und der Schuf, and that's it.
Not necessarily they even call it Afghanistan. You get what I'm saying?
It's all local. It's not even a matter of there's no real Afghani identity, right?
That's what I'm saying. So there's no real. Where are you coming from? Het is in Afghanistan. Het is ook een
I mean, I know this is meer Western, een beetje meer overgekleed. Misschien kan Amerika. Het is ook in Afghanistan.
Yeah,
but the guy saying local.
It doesn't make a difference.
Laat dafke de spraak van de next tribe. Als we te splinter zijn en zij. So when them umgekommen, we wanted to establish a government and a military. The troops is get trained. Ich gesehen alle meine ethnic backgrounds, right? That joined. Why did they join? Many of them had some pride that they wanted to fight the Taliban because they had a personal reason for doing so, whether they suffered under the Taliban or for any number of reasons, or they were not as religious and they didn't want to have that kind of rule, or because or they were going to get paid. It's a job, right? But essentially, you have a conglomerate, you have a concoction, a ganze hodgepodge, a bowl of spaghetti from all kinds of Afghanis. It was coming from Helmand province, so man, you know the 215 Kandak, as they called it. Kandak meant like a battalion or brigade, is like the unit essentially that trains the soldiers and they go fight. Even from Kolmina Afghana. So when you're trying to give them a reason to fight for their homeland, ich bin du mitten desert von Helmand, and I'm trying to fight what? Ich habe Schüsse der Taliban gegangen, ich bin in Helmand, ich komme von Northeast, ich komme von Gardez, ich komme von Herat, ich komme von Sharif, ich komme von Kabul, ich komme von North, South, East. And was habe ich zu sichern, du? Right? It kind of gets into the idea of when policing in the United States as the community policing, dass the civil police was wollen viel nicht dort local. Menschen in Rockland County fuhren an Stutz an NYPD officers, right? You don't have, hast du kein Gefühl for the locals, sie sind part from the community. The same thing. Kommt du to the desert, ich traine, so sich schlugen. At what point geht suffern? And sagt, nein, lass mich ab. Why am I wasting my life?
So läuft weg?
Yeah. It's as simple as that. That's one reason. Now, was ich witnessed alliance is most troubling as well. Corruption. I witnessed corruption firsthand. Okay? Ich kann sagen in 2016, in February of 2016, ich kann sagen, that the ending was mir seit Hand, wo geschehen damals, wo geschehen finden wir fahren, it wouldn't have mattered.
Whenever we left, this would have been the end.
Yes. Okay? And Han Kim we'll get into a little deeper. Could we have done it better? Could we have done it more gradual? Because of the kleine little nuances, but the overall idea, it wouldn't have looked pretty either way.
I don't care about the prettiness versus the equipment. Like pretty, verstehe ich.
And I get to that. And eigentlich for the reason for which I is just to get it off my chest because, yeah, so about it, because I've been there. The things that I'm watching on TV, I was there. I saw these things. And I envisioned this happening in the vibe because of any number of reasons. And I'll
But
share
how come they have explosive people, right? Wie heißt das?
suicide bombers?
No, not them. The army had a explosive expert, right?
EOD, explosive ordnance, yeah.
So for some reason you can't just blow it up.
Yet there's a reason for that, but let me get inside there. So when I was there, what was the corruption that I witnessed? The Americans spend billions and billions of dollars over these years for many different things. I'm talking about $1 trillion from the war altogether, but there was one fund that went to what? It went to the payroll of the Afghan military, right? We supported, yes, we gave them equipment, we gave them uniforms, we gave them gear, we gave them vehicles and weapons and all that, but there was also a budget that we supported the Afghan National Army to build them up to be 300,000 strong. Of course, it works different, but there is a budget.
A payroll.
Yeah. So if nothing else, there was times to fight in Fazan homeland has somewhat of an incentive. As ich wohne in the West, ich come to the South, at least weiß ich, that I support my family back home, right?
Okay.
So imagine ich walk around, ich bin the CEO of a business, and ich walk around with a suitcase with $1 million in cash, right? And they got me divvying, they said the corporation decided they got me geben for jedem meinem, right? So the Balboos, the CEO Alliance, nimmt sein heilig. Nimmt however much, $100,000, right? And I said, guess what? Kann ich nicht wissen. Ich habe immer übrige $20,000, right? And he hands over the suitcase with 120,000 chai. Get to this Fazan deputy, Fazan associate. And they shit gescheit as it goes down to the lowest level. By the time it reaches the mid-level leadership, you can Geld. So you can fucking Geld. And this is not an exaggeration. I saw it firsthand.
Wo stehen sie mit der Geld?
When this is alles corruption. So,
Ja, aber wo stehen die?
at the top level,
Yeah.
they nehmen es für sich. When the guys in Kabul, when the guys around the city, there's this mention that are actually that look middle class, upper middle class, that have Mercedes is coming from Germany, where they're actually doing well. We get warlords, right, that are supported by Western governments throughout the wars, kicking the Soviets and whatnot, right? The Mujahideen, but supported in but supported Osama bin Laden with Geld and weapons, right?
Yeah.
Even a rich guy from Saudi Arabia, but still, the money, they pocket the money.
Wow.
And ich had discussed with the Afghans, I be given a poor soldiers, very careful to verreden, weil Rodde für mich verstand ein Wort English, but there was always onesies and twosies, was some Jahre verstanden, and we would talk to them. In some gewollt, stam waren chill with that. Yeah, we're on guard, right? We're training with them, but we had conversations. I had conversations with the interpreter, right? And some of this alles gesagt firsthand. And some of gut nicht do. Kann was mir getten zu essen. In fliegen wir umkommen in der Früh oder noch Mittag, whenever it's given in the rotation to go and training, they fliegen kommen in the truck, beten for Essen, for Wasser, for anything. They had nothing. But guess what? Wenn in someone joined a bub, the battle update brief, and someone meet mit seine commanders, sie waren lang in seine Hazard, in seine buildings, right? It's like you're having tea with the, we discuss business, but it's going to bricken and to hacken. Naan-bread, the brood was I machen, unfreaking real. The soldiers fliegen kommen in zu gewinnen honor, also ich muss es sagen, in zu geben. Ich habe kommen patches von seinen Units, Afghan flags, like some, man gewollt traden. Ich habe gewollt geben man flag für seine flag. Ich habe gar nicht flags zu legen auf mein Uniform. Sie haben gewollt mans. Sie haben gewollt geben. Du hast es aufgenommen, right? Because they knew whenever we come, ins bringen wir mit was. Ins bringen wir mit resources, Geld, Essen,
Geld.
Ich kann nicht, again, when it comes to Geld, the payroll, this comes from the top. Ich komme from the Kazakh Geld. I'm not the CIA. I'm not the American government. But ich komme mit that truck full mit Wasser because we have water. Ins Geimenischen Eget Wasser, right? Ins Geimenischen Eget MREs, right? Now we have to be careful because you can't make a situation where they're dependent on us and they're not happy in Cezanne as they flocking off into the trucks to become an essence. So there was some protocol there as Cezanne careful with the cigarettes and with the other shit. But in someone discussed it, and guess what? Most of the people that I trained in 2016 are dead right now. I have no way to know this for sure, But in some
That
McKimmon,
makes sense.
in some McKimmon reports, jeden Tag von hinderte soldiers, jeden Tag for the Taliban. I feel when them schon umgekommen dort. It was a little bit less once we started training them a little bit better. But fast forward to today, as soon as some weggenommen their support, es ist zusammengefahren wie a house of cards. Because they didn't have the will to fight at the Taliban. The Taliban have got a cause, right? They had a cause. Whether the cause is Allah, whether the cause is they want to fight the corruption from the other side, or they want to fight the government that was established by the United States, so they want to fight all the American influence. They have a cause. What was the cause of the run-of-the-mill Afghan? Was hat es getan for any number of reasons, and especially if they did it to machen a paar gratis, and he didn't even get that. I witnessed that firsthand. Okay, corruption.
So corruption brought it down. Technically, corruption brought down Afghanistan.
The President Ghani, right? So han sieht the reports from the UN as all elections in the in Afghanistan. The Americans didn't run the elections. We tried to secure the elections because there's always people that fight it and they throw bombs and they try to bomb the polling and whatnot. So the Americans at first were like all completely involved in the election, not the election itself, but securing it. But even following elections, every election since the Afghan war started was a fraudulent election. The UN reported on that every election was fraudulent. Karzai, the Eshter, right? He was a rich guy. He was Western educated in Europe and in the US. President Ghani jetzt, complete fraud. He was a rich guy, and guess what? The day before Kabul fell, teruggetrokken von dort mit der ganze Geld, mit der Geld, wie kommt der Geld? From the American support.
Yeah, obviously.
And so he came to the UAE. Wie kommt der on? There's tens of thousands of Afghans that are trying to get out of Afghanistan right now. But guess what? He hopped on a plane and got the fuck out of there.
That I understand.
But again,
so
there's one commander, the defense minister, which is yet essentially the president of that government that doesn't really exist now because the Taliban is beginning. Hi Salah the Salah. One of the Afghan embassies in the UK or the France somewhere. The picture from President Ghani in the embassy, and they're like from the mensch because they anointed him the president because guess what? He didn't up and run. He's been a fighter, yeah. And again, he's a modern guy. Taliban, right? He's more secular than that.
He's most
Muslim, but secular.
He's most probably the only guy that didn't, be corrupt.
Yeah. Ich actually gesehen reports from him negotiated with the Trump administration negotiated the peace deal. Is given part from them, and it's stark that not that I trust, but I believe that there's a way for us to get to the table with the Taliban and have a joint government. Now maybe he was disillusioned because he was overconfident about that. But ultimately, he actually cared. He wasn't like I wouldn't say he's not corrupted because anyone in power can be corrupted, but he didn't up and leave.
Yeah.
So the corruption is rampant. In no sane person sees this government, the puppet government that the Americans stood up to be legit. And as soon as the Americans said, we're no longer fighting for you, we're pulling the fuck out. House of fucking cards.
Not even a single bullet. Like war type.
With just like hit at the beginning in certain countries before in Poland, terangewakt in certain countries to firing a shot.
Yeah, and everybody took him in.
Yep. Now I'm not saying that jeder will the Taliban that.
No, but they do, by the way, protests yet.
That's fine because not everybody wants to live on the Taliban rule, but Taliban rule is authentic, meaning zij belangen dorten. They're a political party that fought the Americans, and they're horrible people that have a horrible human rights record. The Sharia law, it's no one in their right mind supports the Taliban and what they stand for. But that's their fucking business. Now, if you want to go back to 2001, that we had to go to war to beat Osama bin Laden, to beat Al Qaeda. Fine, we can have that discussion, and there was probably good reasons to go to war. But as we the conversation, what's the plan? What's the exit plan? What define winning? What's the strategy? What's the mission? When I was there, my commanders had a hard time defining the mission. What was them to do? When ich bin in Amerika, wir müssen ins Geheim gehen zu Afghanistan because we're all here. We're all seeing the same thing. But Mazon came with their slogan, we're holding the line because Helmand cannot fall. The fuck does that mean? Helmand cannot fall. Fall to who? To the Taliban? Why do I give a fuck? Right? Especially when I put all this effort, money, and time into the Afghan National Army, and they fold every day because we decided in 2014 that we're no longer fighting your fight. We're going to support you. We're going to TAA, train, advise, and assist. And it fell apart because if we weren't there supporting them. Yeah, there's all these different little nuances with this. The other weapons and equipment. When ich bin umgekommen in 2016, and the Marines left it. A base, Prince Harry, from the Schmuggler from the UK.
Yeah.
He was, both of them, Prince William and Harry, fought in the Afghan war with the Brits. And it was always a secret because they didn't want people to know that they're there at the time for security reasons. Yeah. But they were helicopter pilots, like combat pilots, and they went on missions. They were legitimate fighters. They weren't like, I'm going to pretend you're at war, but in a bunker, and it'll be good PR. No, Harry, there's documentaries about it where he was on the front line with his unit, with his troops, and just, doing the shit. And he could have just as much been killed as anybody else. Camp Leatherneck with the Brits had up to 30,000 troops at the height of the surge, height of the war, right? But alles übergelassen für die Afghanen. Alles übergelassen. Und wenn wir gekommen, ein Jahr halb später, everything was just at a standstill. Because the Taliban haben es nicht gehabt, to begin with, to destroy it or to take it for themselves. And the Afghan leadership, das sind wir später, the Afghan leadership, the commanders, haben nicht gelassen, die Hebrew touchen gut nicht. And so the kleine units aufgesetzt in their kleine pitsy base within the base, haben geschleppt equipment mit portable showers, haben aufgesetzt the base, so können snitzen von ein bisschen, based off equipment, was haben gesalvaged and scavenged von Leatherneck, wir sind gewesen in the Shorab area. Wenn sie dann zurückgegangen, we continue to improve the base, because noch ins kommen ein zweiter, right? Hatte schon, obviously keine nicht dort, but from 2016, 2017, 2018, noch gewesen troops, so everyone was, as much as we had mission, we also worked to improve the base, improve security, improve the amenities. Wenn der umgekommen mit Gästen von MREs, in 2-3 Wochen später ist der General umgekommen zu visiten, mit dem gehandelt MRE in the lunchroom, and sagte, ich hasse nicht das shit. Guess what? Within a week you got a contract. A British guy got that contract with a bunch of Russian kitchen people, right? And mit aufgesetzt zu gewähnt zu essen, zu fressen. Because the general is not going to eat the MREs all day, 3 times a day, right? So we got that on improvement. So one of the many missions with certain platoons on rotated is, I forget the name from the mission, but essentially in the Rotsgang with a convoy, mit flatbeds, in getting plastic to bring in Schreide, and with a boom, we had heavy equipment, so bringing the riesige fridges, right? But we also needed electricity, so that bone the infrastructure of the kleine Pitsy base. But we went in there and we scavenged for goods, right? The erste Mal gegangen auf der Mission, a few months in, da habe ich da upheaten, was ich hatte getroffen. Wenn du von einer Stutt, sie gewähnen the water plants, wo die siehst, in eine größere Stutt, in der Rosen für Stutt, eine größere riesige water tower, 3 solche in ein corner von der base zu supporten Wasser, mitten desert, obviously, right? That's where the Brits built it. Sie gewähnen a shuttle bus service in der Stutt, okay? Just to give you an idea of what a Stutt meint. A Stutt von soldiers, von mission, and there was actually, so in the flight line, the airfield was in some, was georganized, riesig. Nur in ein corner gewesen, wie man geschlafen and all that, and then there was like this yard, a große yard, von containers. Hinderte containers von goods. Und sie gewesen schein ausgestellt. In der Reihe, man kann da fuhren mit Trucks, aufzupicken das Schreide. Hinderte containers. Und von dort haben wir genommen Schreide. Nicht nur the große equipment, man gesagt, nehmen auch tellers mit Lefflich, mit all that shit, you name it, man darf können leben.
Alles darf man.
Man geöffnet Container after Container. So gewähnen wir sogar in ein Corner 10 Containers von Charcoal. Because verrat ich darf machen Lobster mit dem Lobster Tails mit shit. Right? Thousands and thousands of pounds of pallets of just charcoal. Commercial stuff that you do in Costco or the fucking Walmart, right?
How come the Afghanistan don't use them?
Because the commanders have been lost touching their shit.
Why?
Because was the seeds that but they had poor conditions for their soldiers. Some got soldiers with some ending training, so a mission against a garden Leatherneck. So in some got too many schiss, quote unquote, from the because man es sei übergegeben. Sie können do that raushelfen. How fucked up is that? Right? This is inzer millions and billions of dollars, was liegen du mitten in the desert, toit, zerrickt sich nicht. But when the city came in, we were invited by them, and this was their authority, and so we dachten mir Schiss. In jede Pizza sagt, was wir rausgenommen von Leatherneck, kommen zu uns, auch ich darf sein auf a manifest. So the guard by the gate, we gekickt with this heute, was uns genommen. Again, it was never an exact science, because we're still the Americans, and we're going to fuck shit up either way. But so etwas aside der gewähnt. So sie haben gut nicht getouched. 10 containers von pallets upon pallets von charcoal. The next von tellers and leftlich and gupplich. The next von toiletries, right? Kleine Bottle von Shampoos or whatnot. I mean, again, ich trage noch von der regular Sachen, but you name it. Nicht keine weapons and equipment, right? But just regular. So gewähnt a ganze lumberyard. A fucking lumberyard gewähnt next door to this. And we were going around the base jeden Tag, treffen Sachen, was uns kämen nützen. And so we came a shopping list auch, because the kitchen gesagt, hey, they mean pan dort in the kitchen, you know, bringen sie dich, was nicht. And so we getroffen equipment, stam zu gruben, just shovels and picks and whatnot. Es geht nach fucking Stut. Und sie sitzt in mitten desert and millions and millions of... Okay. And so wir dadurch, the building, the biggest building on Leatherneck. 2-3 Stock, and usually they in at war has to, you know, tents or even hard structures, yeah. But you're not building infrastructure with got of Zach Stock. You're not building no skyscrapers for war, right? There's no purpose. There's a beautiful squared rectangular building, which is gebaut mit it looks like what is gebaut in the middle of DC or the middle of New York City. 2-3 Stock, and it stands out because the middle of the desert, because alles is dusty and samt and tense, the way you see it in the movies, right? And du hast a structure that looks like it stands out. So ich frage my platoon leader, the lieutenant, like, what's this? And I pointed, you know what this is? Google it. There's an investigation now by the Marines, right? About this building. It's coming around the building, it's coming around bringing in the ganze unit in the size building from the 500-600 troops, dort to do but aufgebaut their building, so on a headquarters, Anaya headquarters, but this was right at the end of, towards the end of 2014, but this is ending Bowen, and it was lost. And how to do an investigation by the Inspector General within the Marine Corps to investigate the corruption for millions and millions of dollars worth. The guys that had the office supplies was noch in the box gerapped. Computers, you fucking name it, ze liegt noch in the wrapper. So Halawains können wir dann angehen, nehmen Bänklach, nehmen in the TOC, in the Tactical Operations Center, gewesen zusammengestellt mit Hells, mit computers, obviously, mit Signal, mit satellite dishes and all that shit, mit radios, but what's it zusammengestellt mit Hulls, mit maybe it was a hard structure with bunker style, but since gewesen bequem, du siehst that building in the middle of the fucking desert. Millions and millions of dollars. Just because. Because guess what? That war chest is riesig, and the contractors get money, and everybody gets money, and kind of shim acharayt was guide for. I saw that firsthand. Says did do, we spend millions. Weißt du, wie viel Geld gekostet für Wasser, because it's coming not drinking bottled water, because it's coming drinking the local Wasser, because it's chara. $1 million a day just for bottled water in Afghanistan. Right? That's verstehst du, right? But it's getting an idea of the farnem, with the cost from the war given on what? Was wird das übergelost? Das mir gefragt wegen der Equipment, die überlassen, mit the trucks and all that. And of course, man kennt überlassen und verbrennen alles. On a lighter note, which is the funny part, is something we call SI, sensitive items, right? Jede item was ich habe assigned to me, my weapon, my rifle, my pistol. As a medic, your primary weapon should be a pistol, not a rifle. Everyone qualifies with a rifle, but you're not an offensive fighter. That's not a medic to patch people up, essentially. Now, you're still going out on mission, you carry your rifle, but once you are in a position of, as a combat medic, once somebody gets hurt, you can only fire defensively. So the pistol is a defensive weapon. The rifle is an offensive weapon. So I qualify with both. So any sensitive item, whether it's night vision goggles, whether it's my weapons, my pistol, my rifle, my laser on the weapon, right? My scope on all these are sensitive items. The serial number and all this is accounted for. Jede Purtag, okay, everybody line up, noch mission. Let's, and the platoon sergeant has a running list of all the equipment assigned to his soldiers, right? Han will zijn jedem's nods. The nods are the night optical devices, whatever they call it. Night optic devices, nods. Okay, jeder hat nods. Wie da nods, oh shit, I should be in jener Tasch. Get me 20 push-ups, right? It's important to be accountable for your shit. Not only because to be accountable, Chaz v'shulin the skin tune in the wrong hands, we used to call it that we own the night. Why did we own the night? Because the technology of the night vision and the laser, the infrared laser with the Kensten was Kensten from the NAD, is a technology that no one else had other than the Western, like the Americans, maybe the British too. But it was something that nobody else had. So ich kann sein, die Kensten, I have an advantage, so we own the night. So jetzt haben wir sich narrisch gemacht, jede Politik zu machen, sich jede kleine pitchy Sache, was kann sein Wert für the Taliban, the garbage, da fliegen dort rein in the garbage, da fliegen nicht in the waste, in some stellen IED von, whether it was computer parts, at some point, wenn man tun the IED business, ob man zu verstanden, dann können stammlagen alles in garbage. A soldier hat mal angeworfen, a zerrissene Häusen-Uniform in der dumpster, in sein Sergeant ist getroffen, in a platoon, für die nächste Woche, sei eine Mission, ob sie nicht gewähnt auf Mission, wie schaut sie gewähnt auf der Homebase, ich gewähnt a rotation. Jede 2 Schuhe, a zweiter Soldier is in full combat gear, into the briedige Sinn, and he's pulling security with his rifle at the dumpster, and macht sicher, was man leidt daran ist richtig. Now, it's punishment, right? Just to make sure you don't do it again. But it does have an underlying issue, because if the enemy is wearing my uniform, because there's no real rules of law, rules of war.
Rule of engagement.
Yeah, they don't play by those rules. So they would dress in our uniform, which is against the Geneva Convention. You have to be identified in your uniform.
Yeah.
And you can't say be the enemy. That's part of the Geneva Convention. They would go through our trash and salvage everything.
Okay. Versta.
So we have to be careful with all my sensitive items. One of my soldiers in my unit, the only time as a combat medic they treat me nice, because nobody wants to. The karma is a bit. They don't want to fuck with Doc. They call me Doc, because if you fuck with Doc, God knows something's gonna happen to you, right? It's just superstitious bullshit.
Yeah, and Doc needs to take care of you.
So whenever everybody gets smoked, push-ups and get smoked to shit, we call it getting smoked. Doc is usually not nowhere to be found, because he's got other shit to do, and we're not gonna fuck with him. One of my privates, one of my soldiers, left his rifle, his main weapon, in the porta potty.
Oh.
The people that come on base are vetted, all the locals, right? But every day, somebody didn't show up to work. Oh, this guy that we called Bobby, he popped out yesterday on the Taliban hit list that we know, so he didn't come back, right? The barber that we loved, he's no longer here because he knew not to come back, because I feel like the Afghans, zijn cousins of Taliban, because we think of Taliban as if they're MS-13, some fringe, God knows what. No, it's dan neighbors, it's dan brothers, it's dan Schwester. Die are Democrat, even a Republican, right? To us, it's an enemy, but to them, it's just tribal shit, right? Jeder gewusst alles. You can trust them with Gunish. So they knew not to come to work because they knew they popped out. Because they all know everything. To leave your weapon in the shitter, I need to find in that zweite Sergeant is getroffen, gebringt in the Sergeant. And man weiß doch, wem es ist, weil the serial number belongs to the soldier. So, mit dem vorgehalten, like at the ganze Maß, so somebody must have taken it away from me to get me in trouble and put it in the shitter. None of it made any sense. Jeder gewiss der MS, but gehalten der Link. Gewiss, als jeder andere weiß der MS.
He stuck with it.
Guess what? The ganze unit, we just finished mission, them 3 came for mission, them geschachten teut, right? And it's got schlafen, like we're done. Everybody in the center from the room, front, back goes. Front, do push-ups. When I say front, you do push-ups. When I say back, you say do flutter kicks on your back. And when I say go, you run in place. And imagine doing that on a loop. And it gets faster and it gets slower. And you're just kicking up dust and you're breathing dust. You schwitz. It's 130 degrees at night. That was the only time I got smoked like that. For 45 minutes straight.
Wow. Holy.
He didn't give it up. So I respect him for that. He stuck through it, right? And he got in trouble. He got an Article 15, which is punishment. He got in trouble, but he stuck to his lie. But my point is, Inzafen's not accountable for other shit. And yes, kick off TV, and it's not just TV. We know that this shit happens. This shit we gave to the ANA. We gave them this shit. And they just dropped their weapons and left. we are no longer fighting their fight. We are no longer engaging the Taliban. Part of the peace agreement with President Trump was that they're not going to fuck with us. Well, this has been going on for a while. Now that you don't fuck with me, I'm not going to fuck with you. But it was not a real agreement, a real peace deal. This time around, it was. Which means the Americans are not going to engage the Taliban. They're not going to engage us. They're going to allow us to leave, right? And they're going to allow us to take whatever we want with us, right? Now, fast forward to today, it all fell apart and we're trying to scramble. We're trying to piece this together in a hurry and try to get it right. But the idea was that the Taliban are now controlling controlling the points into Kabul airport. But they're not trying to fight anyone inside. Why? Because, yes, they're controlling Kabul, but they know that we have until August 31st to get the fuck out. So if they drop weapons, equipment, heavy machinery, heavy vehicles, armored vehicles, we can't drop bombs on them. We have an agreement in place. If you want to get back into the war,
incinerate it.
If you want to, but the Afghans didn't do it. We don't have the access now to go back and destroy that. The Afghans wouldn't do it. We have grenades, different grenades. One of them is an incendiary grenade. If our vehicle breaks down, we can't salvage it, and we're just in the middle of, we're sitting ducks, and we have to get rid of this vehicle. We throw the incendiary device into the vehicle. We'd rather destroy it than leave it to the enemy, obviously, right? With the radios in them and whatever else. Yeah. This was a canteen, and so the light part of it, the funny part is that the piece of equipment was ich red schon weg von der mic schon 10 minutes. A piece of equipment that accounted for and do willy-nilly millions of dollars, thousands and thousands of pieces of equipment, weapons, ammunition.
Hundreds and millions of dollars, bro.
Yeah, in equipment, in guns, and technology, night vision goggles. How do I know the night vision goggles? Because here Masa. Ein Tag, zoek men in in charge, in some of the years bekommen in some of the equipment, but we just got a batch of, I don't know, let's say 200 night vision goggles, right? Modified that we give them. Obviously, it's not to our specs, but it's similar because we're fighting alongside them. They have to have that technology. Jeder Afghan soldier, that was the only time I ever saw them on base. We handed it out on our base. So jeder was reingekommen to give heavy security, was reingelost in their base to a certain building. Jeder is reingekommen in Moginim forensics, was reingelegt in a database. They serial number with they paranoids belangt for the Afghan soldier. Moginim pictures fins on Augen, fins on fingerprints, fins on who, if you name it, right? And that's the database we built over 10, 15 years of war for any hit list. You know, the Taliban, the Al-Qaeda in Iraq, ISIS and all that, right? We open the information because it's an ongoing... Jeder prisoner in Iraq, besides the war in 2005, 6, 7, you do a database. Wenn geworden ISIS, haben gewiss, wer das ist. When we them released in 2011, when they were rausgegangen, we knew who those were because we have the building database. So when someone go to a database, von jeder fucking Afghan soldier hat an Nas. Ein Tag wird man gewohnt. It was like a few hours that we spent. It was very thorough. Jede Sache geschrieben. One pair of nods is unaccounted for. Was geschehen? The Afghan soldier became $2,000 from the Taliban. I was like, fuck it. Du hast das. Und ich komme nicht zurück. What are you going to do about it? Like, there is no trust. It's all a house of cards. It's all bullshit. And if we are not there, as soon as we pulled out of Helmand in 2014, it's zusammengefallen. We can sit again in 2016. Now, I'm proud of my... So, ich will jetzt sagen, wegen mich allein. I'm very proud of my service, right? I'm proud that I was down there. Because what was my mission? Forget the bullshit with the commander gesucht and the generals gesucht. I joined, and you ask most, if not all soldiers will tell you the same thing. We don't fight for the flag. We don't fight for the Constitution. Yes, of course we do, right? But our mindset... It's not about any of that. We're fighting for the men and women to our left and our right. My mission that I was given as a brand new private in the Army, I was responsible for people that were my rank, people that outranked me, captains, lieutenants, sergeant first classes, E1s through E7s, people that outranked me with 10 years of service, right? I was given the responsibility as the only medic responsible for 25 to 26 soldiers. And no one got hurt. And I brought them all home.
Chaim, it was a pleasure. Ich habe es enjoyed.
Yeah.
Peace.